Is it possible to beat the Liberty Falls Easter egg with only a baseball bat? That was a question that was burning in my mind as soon as I got both my hands around that thing. Now, with those of you not familiar with how zombies works, the main idea of zombies is just to survive as many rounds as possible. But as time went on, they started adding Easter eggs that started out as little secrets that you could find in the map and grew into full-blown storylines. Now, each Easter egg has a series of tasks ranging from pretty simple to insanely complex for no reason, and each Easter egg has a different amount of steps. With the launch of Black Ops 6, they released 2 zombies maps, one of them being Terminus, the other being Liberty Falls. But unfortunately for the Terminus Easter egg, I'm pretty sure it does require weapons, so until I figure out a workaround, we will put that one on the back burner. But I knew on paper, you could complete Liberty Falls' Easter egg with a baseball bat. It was just a matter of figuring out how. And about halfway through, I kind of started to figure it wasn't even possible at all. But there were a few tricks I figured out that made it go actually insanely smoothly. My name's Mochato, thanks for clicking on this video. Click that like button if you're enjoying it, and click subscribe if you want to see more. But today, I'm going to show you guys how I beat the entire Liberty Falls Easter egg using only a baseball bat. Now, the rules for this challenge that I made up are simple. No using lethals, no using tacticals, no using any streaks, that includes lethal injection, and obviously none of the specialist abilities that do damage. Oh, and definitely no gobblegums. Now, I'm not going to lie, I did use a tomahawk once in the run because I completely forgot I wasn't supposed to use it, but it was on like a zombie at the end of the round that I would have very easily just hit with the bat. So I don't really think it affects the integrity of my completing this challenge, but I could totally do it again without that. It's just, you know, it's not that deep, okay? Now, for those of you who don't know how it works, here's a brief rundown of the Easter egg. First, you have to get these 3 parts. Then after that, you can build this gun. You can also get the gun from the mystery box, but I wasn't going to depend on RNG for this. Then you have to collect these 3 things, then you have to build this thing. Then you summon this boss, capture a soul, activate these projector things, summon another boss, and then bring it all back to the church, where you fight both bosses and a bunch of zombies. It's pretty simple, and it's relatively quick in terms of zombies Easter eggs. Now, let's go over how melee weapons work in Black Ops 6. In this Call of Duty, they've introduced a new class of melee weapons. So when you press your melee button normally, you hit zombies with your gun. But if you hold onto the melee button, you pull out your dedicated melee weapon, which is a knife up until you get to level 52, and then you unlock the baseball bat. Now, each of these melee weapons has 2 different attacks that aren't really that different, but I'll explain how they are. One is your primary. I play on mouse and key, so I'm going to describe the controls that way. But one is my left click, which is what I use to shoot normally. That's just a regular swing. It's not precise. It's basically your standard knifing animation. With your right click, you can target specific limbs of the body and damage them instead of just doing a blind blanket damage swing. And as we go on, you'll see this is very important for fighting manglers. Now, I know what you're thinking. How could you possibly do enough damage with your melee weapon once you start getting into later rounds? And if this was original zombies, you'd be completely right. But in this game, you're allowed to both pack-a-punch melee weapons and increase their rarity using scrap. But you can only pack-a-punch 3 times, and the rarity only goes up to gold. So it's really better to get the Easter egg done sooner rather than later. With all that in mind, I'm just going to go straight into the run and break down every major obstacle I ran into along the way and how I got around it. Now, the beginning of the run is pretty easy because the bat still is a one-shot for a couple rounds. But compared to the knife, unfortunately it has a little bit of a damage drop-off, and by like round 5, it's kind of useless. So I had to get a little creative because at this point, I didn't have much scrap or enough points to even pack a punch. And then I started to think to myself, what was the one way I was going to be able to get more melee damage besides pack-a-punching or changing my weapon's rarity? And then it hit me. They introduced a new perk in this game called Melee Macchiato. And what Melee Macchiato does is whenever you have a gun equipped, it replaces your melee bash with this powerful palm blast. And, you know, I guess it's kind of effective. But if you're in a position where you're emergency meleeing, I don't know how useful that is. So I kind of ignored it. But the whole time I was under the impression that this perk only applied to when you have a gun out. So one time when I was messing around in a solo match, I tested it out.
Alright, I'm gonna try something here. I'm gonna see this perk.
And boy, did it work. It nearly doubled my damage output without any augments. But I didn't even really know about augments at the time of doing this, so I'll get into how those work with this perk later. But for now, we'll just say that I had no idea that Melee Macchiato was going to be one of the most important parts of this entire run. So after grabbing Melee Macchiato, I continued on with grabbing the parts, and all of them were pretty easy except for this stupid bowling alley one, because there's pretty much no way to defend yourself while you're doing this in solo anyways, but it's even more annoying when you're only using a baseball bat and no monkeys or decoy grenades. Despite being a huge pain, I did get it done, and I continued on to pick up the jet gun. Obviously only for the Easter egg, of course. I continued along, pack-a-punching, buying my perks, and basically just getting ready for the fight that was going to ensue. Because this really was a race against time, as the bosses scale with each round, and only promise to get more difficult the longer it takes me to complete the Easter egg. Speaking of bosses, there was still a big three-headed problem that I still didn't know how to deal with, and that's called a Margwa, or an Abomination, in this game. My current solution for elite zombies, which were Abominations and Amalgams, was to hit them a few times, realize I was doing nothing, then ignore them and use a streak, or a gun. But obviously that wasn't going to work here, so I had to figure something out. Then I realized that on top of all the damage I listed earlier, including melee Mochato, I could also stack on elemental damage, because you can apply ammo mods to your bat. And the best one for bosses is called Napalm Burst, because it applies a continuous burning effect even when you're not hitting them. So in an earlier match, I applied that and went to see how effective it was. But then I figured out that you needed an augment for it to apply to bosses in the first place. So then, I started diving into augments. And when I looked at the skill tree for melee Mochato, everything changed for this run. But we'll get there in a second. Despite this burn now applying to elite enemies, it still just wasn't doing quite enough damage to make it reasonable, and any boss encounter I was going to run into would take unrealistically long, so I needed a quicker way to defeat them. And it wasn't until I was messing around with my friend on Terminus that I figured out a bug that I'm pretty sure works only with the baseball bat, but it might work with the knife too. If you rapidly alternate between your right click and left click attacks, the game will stop waiting for the animations to complete to register the damage. So instead of hitting them every time the bat swings, you're hitting them every time you click. And this can allow you to do a huge chunk of damage that you normally wouldn't be able to in a really short amount of time. And this works really well with Ether Shroud, because then you can just run up on them and crowd them. There was a catch though. There was no real visual indicator besides the health bar going down really fast, and it wasn't always consistent because I still don't fully know how it works. But the bottom line is, it did work, and I just needed to go in and spam my clicks. So once I got this down, I was able to make quick work of both bosses that I needed to capture the soul of to progress the Easter egg. But fighting them outside with no zombies was going to be an entirely different challenge than fighting them in the church with a bunch of zombies that can sprint way faster. So the last big issue I ran into was survivability. So within the skill tree for melee Mochato, there's a very, very important ability that I finally noticed, and it basically grants vampirism, or leeching, when you kill a zombie with a melee weapon. Not only was this going to change the boss fight, but this would just make the entire run smoother, because basically every time I would go into a crowd to swing the bat, I would get hit by at least one of them because there's like 20 swinging arms at the same time. But with vampirism, that hit would get completely canceled out because I would get a kill in the process and get my health returned. So when it came time for the church, I would run circles and just try and get a few kills here and there to recharge my health.
That's right. Bingo! Every few kills empowers the SDG. Trust me, we want that orb to keep growing.
And because of a few missed bat swings, it got pretty close, and I almost actually choked my first run. Now, ultimately, the first boss went down kind of easy because manglers aren't too bad with the bat. But the Abomination and the Super Sprinter zombies were really, really tough.
Here he comes.
So I kind of was just running away from him stalling until I could recharge my Ether Shroud or get enough points to triple pack my bat. But even with Ether Shroud, double pack wasn't quite cutting it, so I just kept farming zombies until I got 30,000 points. Then, once I triple packed, the run was basically over. And all my research and practice had paid off. Got him! I got him!
Nice, nice. That's it.
I'm not asking for help, I'm demanding!
Well, that about wraps it up. Thank you guys for watching, and if you found this fun or interesting, please drop a like. And if you have any ideas for any other cool challenges I could do, then go ahead and drop them in the comments. Because I had a lot of fun with this, and I am obsessed with Black Ops 6, and I can't put it down. But yeah, thanks again for watching. Until next time, stick around.